5 princesses, 1 empire, not a single law that resolves who will occupy the throne, and the only person who must execute without the consent of 5, this former family therapist from our world who died from an allergy to anesthesia and woke up in a strange body for an hour. Before that, he has to get before them. But first about the napkin. He trips over a box of napkins in his own office. He breaks his knee. He goes under for surgery. The anesthesiologist administers the drug and his heart stops. 1 in 500,000. For 13 years, this man sat in a chair facing people who wanted to destroy each other. Husbands and wives, mothers and children, words more terrifying than any weapon. He learned to catch that 1 second, the very moment when a person ready to kill suddenly falls silent, suddenly hears. He wrote a book about it. 200,000 copies sold. 46 years old, a white ceiling. The face of an anesthesiologist with an expression he himself had observed for 13 years. The face of a man who understands that everything has gone wrong. Darkness, cold, marble. He opens his eyes. The ceiling is painted in gold and blue. Angels or demons. His body won't obey him. Strange hands, slender, young. He looks at his palms and finds neither the scar from the coffee maker on his left nor the callus from the pen on his right. 18 years old. He determines this instantly because he worked with teenagers for 13 years and knows what a body that hasn't finished growing looks like. Narrow shoulders, slender wrists, not a single scar. He stands up. His legs hold him. A room the size of his apartment. Marble floor. Columns along the walls. A window 3 men tall. Outside the window, a city that isn't on any map. Towers of white stone. Flags on the spires. Smoke from 1,000 furnaces. A fortress wall encircles the city. Fields beyond the wall. Mountains beyond the fields. A scroll lies on the table by the bed. He unrolls it. The letters are foreign, but he reads them fluently. It's impossible, but it's happening. The scroll is short. Imperial Court Advisor Kyle Ren is required to appear in the throne room before noon to be presented to the heiresses. The Chancellor's signature. A seal bearing a 6-rayed coat of arms. He reads it 3 times. He sits down on the bed. He closes his eyes. He opens them. Nothing changes. Whoever Kyle Ren was before, now Kyle Ren is him. The door swings open without a knock. An old man in black enters, skinny as a stick, the eyes of a man who stopped being surprised 40 years ago. Maurice, first secretary of the Chancellery. He speaks evenly, without emotion, like a man reading a shopping list. The emperor died 3 days ago. The 5 daughters are in the palace. Each already knows of the advisor's existence. The advisor has 1 hour, but his hands are trembling, barely noticeable. Most wouldn't pay attention, but he isn't most. For 13 years, he has watched his hands. Hands speak before faces. Maurice is afraid. He asks what exactly the advisor does. Maurice answers. The advisor serves as a bridge between the heiresses, a neutral figure, without lands, without a coat of arms, without an army. The late emperor created this position for balance. The only person at court who cannot be executed without the consent of all 5 sisters. And this is where it gets interesting. He asks why the emperor needed a bridge. Maurice falls silent. Then he answers. The emperor knew his daughters. He knew that after his death, they would tear the empire into 5 pieces, and each piece would die separately. 6 provinces, 5 heirs. Not a single law determining who would inherit the throne. He asks why the law wasn't written. Maurice stares at him as if he's heard the silliest question in history. Because until his last day, the emperor believed he would find a way to choose one. He didn't. He died. He left behind 5 daughters and 1 advisor without a sword. Maurice leaves. The door closes. He sits on the floor because the bed is too soft for what is happening. The Sailor Empire, 6 provinces from the icy north to the southern jungles, 400 years of the dynasty, the continent's largest state, and it stands on the brink because one man failed to write a single line. He counts. 5 sisters, 5 branches of power. Elara, the army. Serena, diplomacy. Vivian, intelligence. Lyra, science and engineering. Nora, religion and the people. 5 fingers without a palm. He knows this pattern. He's seen it 100 times. A family where the father was the only thing holding everyone together. The father dies, and the children rush into war over the inheritance. Only usually they divide the house and the bank account. These ones are dividing an empire. And one more thing. Maurice didn't say it outright, but the tremor in his hands spoke for him. He walks to the window, looks east. Mountains. Beyond the mountains, the steppe. Beyond the steppe lies what Maurice left unsaid. 100,000 nomads. A horde that has already burned 3 kingdoms. The spies know. The generals know. The sisters know. And each one is thinking the same thing. I'll have time to deal with the rest before the horde reaches the border. He knows this pattern by heart. A family falling apart because everyone thinks, first I'll win the argument, then we'll fix things. No one fixes anything, because after the war, there's nothing left to fix. In his past life, the worst that could happen was divorce and trauma for the children. Here, the worst is 100,000 horsemen on the ruins. He has no sword, no magic, no army, not even an office with 2 chairs and a box of tissues. He has only the habit of listening, and 1 hour. He gets up from the floor, pulls on a gray doublet without coats of arms, looks in the mirror. A stranger's face, young, ordinary. The face of a man who could go unnoticed in a crowd. Perhaps that is his only weapon. He walks to the door. The hallway was longer than necessary. It he noticed right away. The architect was building a palace so that everyone who walked toward the throne hall felt less than every step. The ceilings grew higher. The columns became thicker. The light fell from above through narrow windows and cut the floor in strips. He walked and counted his steps, the habit from a past life. When the customer walked in the office, he counted seconds until the first word. 3 seconds. A person is confident. 7. The person is nervous. More 10. The man has arrived not on his will. Now he was the client, and seconds passed. 2 guards at the doors to the chamber didn't look at it. They looked at Maurice, who was ahead. Maurice nodded. The doors opened. The throne hall was empty. Almost. The throne stood on a platform in 7 steps. Wide. Stone. Without cushions. In front of the throne, in a semicircle, stood 5 armchairs. Each was from the others. The first, oak, solid, with armrests worn to a shine. Second, light, with carved legs, upholstered blue silk. Third, black, without backrest, stool rather not armchair. Fourth, metal, with mechanism on armrest, gears and lever. Fifth, wooden, simple, with carved sun on the backrest. 5 chairs, 5 characters. He read them earlier than saw the hostess. Maurice pointed the A place, not armchair. A circle on the floor. Mosaic of gray stone evenly in the area of the semicircle. He stood in circle and realized the plan of the emperor. The stands in center. Not higher, not lower. In the center. Equidistant from each. 5 minutes of silence. Then they entered. She to enter. Elara. He recognized her by her before than I saw his face. A heavy stride, steady. Every movement is calculated to an attack. It was tall, wider than shoulders, short hair, a scar on the temple to jaw. Armor is not ceremonial, but battle armor. She got an oak armchair. She looked at it. I looked at the throne. The second entered Serena. The complete contrast. Soft footsteps. A dress that moved like water. A smile that appeared earlier than she entered the hall. Her were for half a second later lips. He noticed. Half a second. The difference between that who smiles and those who have decided to smile. Serena sat in blue armchair. She looked at him. I nodded, as if he was her old acquaintance. The third to enter, Vivian. Or rather, he didn't how she walked in. She had already in the hall. She was in black stool. He could have that a second ago the stool was empty. Thin, pale, eyes dark and motionless. She looked at him like as he himself saw at clients. Studied. I read them. Analyzed into pieces. That was unpleasant. It was familiar. On the fourth entered Lyra. Young. Younger the others. Maybe be 20. Maybe be fewer. Hands in stains from ink and something chemical. She sat in metal chair and immediately touched the mechanism on armrest. The gears clicked. She didn't look at it. She looked at mechanism. He saw this before, 1,000 times. A man who looks at phone when the family sits down at the table. Not because that it isn't interested, but because it's too interesting. And it hurts. He entered Nora, a white dress, simple as and her armchair. Her is under a scarf. Calm face. Too calm. He knew this type. The kind of person who'd found a system that explained everything, and clung to it because without that system, there was nothing but emptiness beneath their feet. Nora sat down, folded her hands, closed her eyes for 3 seconds, opened them, looked at him. There was something in her gaze he hadn't expected. Pity. 5 sisters, 5 chairs, a single circle on the floor. Silence. He stood and waited. Not because he didn't know what to say, but because the first person to speak in a room full of conflict loses. That's rule number 1. Whoever speaks first defines themselves as needy, and the needy are weak. He waited. 30 seconds. A minute. Alara spoke first. She said she didn't understand why their father had created this position. She said the empire needed a ruler, not a mediator. She said that if he was smart, he would choose a side, and choose wisely. He listened. He didn't nod. He didn't shake his head. He listened. Serena spoke second. She said she was glad to see the advisor. She said the empire was going through difficult times, and sensible people should stick together. She said her door was always open. Every word was as smooth as the silk on her chair, and just as slippery. Vivian didn't speak. She looked at him, then at Maurice, then at him again, and gave a barely perceptible nod. It wasn't a greeting. It was a message. I know. 2 words without words. He felt a chill run down his spine. If Vivian knew who he really was, it could all end before it even began. Lyra spoke 1 sentence. She asked what exactly he was good for. Not rudely, not hostilely, like an engineer asking why a part is needed. Nora spoke last. She said the gods hadn't brought him here by accident. She said she saw a sign in him. She said that if he served the right purpose, the heavens would protect him. If not, then heaven would find another instrument. 5 voices, 5 approaches. He'd heard this before. Every time a new family came in for their first session. The husband says the wife must choose a side. The wife says she's happy to cooperate, but every word is a trap. The oldest child is silent and knows more than anyone. The middle child asks why they even need this therapist. The youngest says God will decide everything. 5 roles, 1 family. He knew what to say. Or rather, he knew what not to say. He spoke 3 sentences. First, he wasn't here to take sides. Second, he wasn't here to be useful to just one of them. Third, he's here because their father understood one thing that none of them understands. He fell silent. Alara narrowed her eyes. Serena stopped smiling for a second. Vivian tilted her head. Lyra looked up from the mechanism. Nora unclasped her folded hands. 1 second. All 5 listened. It was the very second he had been looking for 13 years. The second when people ready to destroy each other suddenly stop. Not because they want peace, but because they want to know. He didn't say exactly what their father understood. Not now. It was a hook. The first of many. He bowed, turned around, walked toward the door. Maurice caught up with him in the hallway. The old man was breathing heavily. He said that no one had ever turned their back on the 5 heirs. He said it was either bravery or stupidity. He didn't answer. He was thinking about something else. About 5 pairs of eyes. About 5 ways to say the same thing. You are my instrument. 5 statements. Not a single question. None of them asked what he wanted. He reached his room, closed the door, sat down on the floor, began to think. Ilara, strength, direct, aggressive, afraid to appear weak. Doesn't hide the scar on her face, but displays it. It's a shield. Serena, control, every word measured. Her smile is a weapon, more dangerous than Ilara's because you can't tell where the blow will come from. Vivian, knowledge. She knows about him. She might know everything. The most dangerous of the 5, but also the loneliest. A person who sees right through everyone is always alone because no one forgives someone who knows the truth. Lyra, practicality. She doesn't want power. She wants to be left alone. But they won't leave her alone because all 4 of them need her brain. They use her in silence. She knows it. And the hatred within her is quiet and deep. Nora, faith, sincere. But beneath the faith lies a foundation of fear. If you remove God from her system, she'll crumble. That's why she won't crumble. She will cling to her faith until the very end, even if that faith demands sacrifices. 5 portraits. The first sketch. It was incomplete. He knew that. The first session never gives the full picture, but it gives direction, and the direction was clear. These 5 women were not enemies. They were a family that had lost the one person who held them together. Now they were doing what all families do after a loss, fighting each other because it's impossible to fight grief. He knew what to do, not with the empire, with the family. You have to start with the weakest link, not the weakest person, the weakest connection. He closed his eyes and saw the diagram. 5 dots, lines connecting them. Some lines were thin, some were broken. One line was burning. Ilara and Serena. 7 years of hatred. Something had been said, something irreparable, or irreparable at first glance. He would start with them. Not tomorrow, now. He stood up, straightened his doublet, opened the door. He found Ilara not in her chambers. Maurice said that the heiress is training every evening in lower courtyard. Every evening, without exception. Even in the day of my father. The lower yard turned out to be a site measuring half soccer field. Sand, wooden posts for practicing strikes, weapon stands along the walls. Ilara was alone. She struck at the planner with sword. A blow. Strike. Strike. The rhythm is steady. Breathing is steady. She hadn't trained, she thought. He saw it before. The client who came and started to rearrange things on the table. Adjust the pillow. Twist the ring on finger. Body is to the head can work. Ilara thought through sword. He stopped at 10 steps. Don't closer. The distance that speaks I hear, but don't intruding. The basic rule of contact with aggressive customer. She noticed him on 4th beat. She stopped. 5th blow. 6th. 7th. On 8th, she drove sword into the trick and left it sticking out. She turned around. Sweat on forehead. The scar on the temple to jaw glistened. She asked what he. Her voice steady. Not hostile, not friendly, neutral, like a wall. He said that had come to ask one question. One, not more. She crossed her arms. That was a barrier. Closed posture. Defense. But it didn't left. She ordered to leave him. So inside was interest. A little. But enough. He asked, "How months will last without Serena? Serena. Without Vivian. Without siege machines, Lyra. Without mobilization of the people, which ensures Nora. Only the army. Only swords and spears and walls. How many months against 100,000 nomads?" Alara remained silent. 4 seconds, he counted. 4 seconds is a long time for a person who is used to respond instantly. 4 seconds meant that she was counting, not words, numbers. She replied. She said that her army was on the continent. She said that 30,000 soldiers stand 100,000 of savages. She said that walls of the empire were built 400 years and not a horde of could overcome. He listened. He nodded. Didn't argue. Then said that didn't ask if her army. He asked how. Months. Alara clenched her jaw. Her on-cheekbones tensed. He saw how she pressed the answer that has in your mind. The answer that her didn't like. She said 8, maybe 10. 10 if we get lucky in winter. He said thank you. He turned around. He toward the exit. She called him. She asked why he asked this question. He didn't turn around. He said that he would ask a exactly question 2 of her sisters. And what? The answers were similar. He left. Alara stood standing beside, by the by which stuck a sword. He knew that she would think, not about him, about the number. 8 months. She said it out loud, and now it has real. Before it was abstract. Now it was a fact that she confirmed. Confirmed. Arithmetic. The powerful tool for a person who believes only in strength. He did go to Serena. He right away. In the 2 sisters was a space. Time for the first question settle. Instead that he went to library. Maurice said that the library is to the advisor. The only position in the palace where we're without an escort. The library was huge. 3 floors, spiral staircases, dust on the top shelves. He wasn't looking for books. He was looking for his family's history. He found the Sailor family chronicles from the past 40 years, heavy, leather-bound volumes. He opened the first one. He read quickly, skipping over dates and battles. He was looking for names. He was looking for relationships. He was looking for the moment when the 5 sisters ceased to be a family and became factions. He found it. 23 years ago, Emperor Sailor lost his wife, the mother of 5 daughters. Alara was 12 then. Serene was 10. Vivian was 8. Lyra was 5. Nora was 3. The Empress died giving birth to her 6th child. The child didn't survive either. A boy. The heir. He reread that paragraph twice. A boy. The only son. He died with his mother, and with him died the clear line of succession. He closed the volume and opened the next one. He looked for what happened next. He found it. The emperor withdrew into himself. He handed over control to the council for a year. When he returned, he began to distribute responsibilities among his daughters. Not because he wanted to, because he had to. He gave each a branch of power, not according to ability, according to age. Ilara, the eldest, the army. Serena, the second, diplomacy. Vivian, the third, intelligence. Lyra, the fourth, science. Nora, the fifth, temples. He jotted notes on a scrap of paper he found between the pages. He drew a diagram. 5 names, lines, arrows, question marks. The problem was clear. The emperor wasn't building a system. He was distributing the burden. He didn't want his daughters to rule. He wanted them to be occupied while he searched for a solution. A solution he never found in 23 years. He flipped through the pages. 7 years ago. A grand reception in honor of the dynasty's 400th anniversary. Alara was 27. Serena was 25. A ceremonial speech. Alara spoke before the army. Serena was supposed to introduce the foreign ambassadors. Something went wrong. The chronicle didn't specify what exactly. Just a dry entry. An incident at the reception. The heiress general left the hall. The ambassadors were recalled for 3 months. Incident. One word. Behind that word lay a rift that had split the 2 older sisters for 7 years. He knew the chronicle wouldn't give him an answer. Chronicles are written for posterity, not for the truth. He needed someone who had been there. Maurice. He found the old man in the office, a small room cluttered with papers. Maurice was sitting at a desk, writing. He asked about the incident at the reception 7 years ago. Maurice stopped writing. He set down his quill. He looked at him. For a long time. Then he spoke. Serena made a toast. In her toast, she thanked each sister for her contribution to the empire. She called Vivian the keeper of secrets, Lyra the mind of the dynasty, Nora the conscience of the people, Ilara the shield of the empire. A shield, not a sword, not a commander, not a leader. A shield. Ilara heard the difference. A shield protects, a sword leads. Serena placed Ilara in a subordinate position before 300 guests and 12 ambassadors, in public, with a smile. One word. He closed his eyes. One word 7 years ago, and a rift across the entire empire. He asked Maurice if it had been intentional. Maurice said that with Serena, it was impossible to know for sure. He returned to his room, sat on the floor, stared at the diagram. Ilara and Serena. Rift number 1. The oldest, the deepest. But not the most dangerous. The most dangerous crack was between him and Vivian. She knew. He didn't understand how or exactly how much she knew, but the nod in the throne room was unambiguous. I know who you are. Or rather, I know you're not who you seem to be. Vivian headed intelligence. She had spies in every corridor, in every room, possibly in this one. He looked around. A small room, a bed, a table, a chair, a mirror, a window that looked out onto the courtyard. He checked the corners, peered behind the mirror, ran his hand under the table, found it. A thin copper tube, embedded in the wall behind the mirror. It went down somewhere. A listening tube. Old technology. Simple. Effective. Everything he said in this room went to Vivian. He didn't pull the tube out. He didn't plug it. Instead, he sat down next to the mirror, next to the tube, leaned toward it, and said, he said he knew she was listening. He said he wasn't going to hide. He said that if she wanted to talk, she should come herself. Not through spies, not through tubes in the walls. In person. Because he was the only person in the palace who wouldn't lie to her face. Not because he was good, but because lying to her was pointless. Silence. The receiver was silent. He leaned back against the wall, closed his eyes. Day 1. One question for Ilara. One discovery in the library. One message from Vivian. 3 dots on the map. 2 more tomorrow. Serena. Nora. He'll leave Liru for later. She requires a different approach. Not a question. Not a challenge. She needs someone to ask her for the first time not what she can do for the Empire, but what she herself wants. But that's for later. Now, sleep. If he can. He lay down on the bed. Too soft. Too big for one person. The ceiling with angels looked down on him from above. He thought that in his past life, after his first session with a difficult family, he'd have a glass of wine and watch the news. Here there's neither wine nor news. There are 5 women who want to use him, a horde coming from the east, and a copper pipe in the wall through which someone might be listening to his breathing. He closed his eyes. Tomorrow would be longer. The morning began with a knife, not in the back, on a tray. Someone brought breakfast while he was bread, cheese, a jug of water, and a 4 butter stuck in cheese point up. Message, not a threat. A threat is knife under the pillow. A knife in cheese is a reminder. We enter when we want. You are, and we don't. He pulled a knife. He spread cheese on bread. I ate it. If they wanted to scare, then they not the food. He survived 13 years of sessions where people threw chairs. Knife and cheese is level kindergarten. It came from the room and went to look. Serena. Maurice said that the second heiress accepts in the blue living room every morning in 8 to 10. Techniques for ambassadors, petitioners, trade representatives. Serena worked with people. That was her field, her weapon. The blue living room turned out to be a hall painted with clouds, soft armchairs, carpets, the scent of flowers. Everything was arranged so that the guest could relax. So forget what he in the bed. Professional work. He appreciated it. His own office was set up according to that same principle. Soft walls, warm light, armchairs of the same height so no one feels tall or superior. Serena knew this trick. She was negotiations as a therapist conducts a session, only with another purpose. The therapist wants the client find their answer. Serena wants for the client find her answer and thought that he his own. She was busy. A man on expensive robe sat across from her, the ambassador or merchant. Serena listened. She nodded. She smiled. He stood up by the wall and waited. He watched. Serena worked flawlessly. She asked questions about which only one convenient answer. She praised her for intelligence after every such answer. She created an illusion of equality in complete control. A person in a deck walked through 20 minutes, satisfied, confident that I made the decision on my own. Serena looked at him. She smiled. She invited to sit down. He sat down. The chair was softer than necessary, too deep. A person in such chair sits lower. He looks up. He moved to edge. He sat up straight. Serena noticed. Her smile became for degree colder. She asked, "Then she help?" He said that had come not to help. I came with a question. She said that loves questions. He asked, how of her commercial contracts are without Army Alara behind their backs? How many ambassadors are in these plush armchairs because that behind walls the palace there 30,000 soldiers? How does diplomacy real, and how much just beautiful wrapper for someone else's power? Serena didn't stop smiling, but the smile had changed. It became thinner, sharper. She replied that diplomacy and is the ability to transform another's strength into your result. She said that without her, the Army Alara is just 30,000 hungry people without food, without trade routes, without allies on flanks. He nodded. He said that it was a wonderful answer. He said that he asked that same question to Alara yesterday, only the other way around. Asked her how she would last without diplomacy. Serena stopped smiling. On for the second. Then the smile returned, but it was different. Real, short, cruel. She asked what Alara. He said that wouldn't tell. That's that didn't told to Alara what Serena. That's that his job doesn't carry the words between sisters. His job to mirrors. Serena remained silent. 5 seconds. He counted. For Serena, 5 seconds of silence is an eternity. It lived in words. Silence for her was a defeat. She spoke up. She said that appreciates his honesty. She said that he's more interesting than she expected. She said that she likes interesting people. He stood up. He thanked for his time. He went to the door. At the door, tip, he said one sentence. He said that in that Stories with a Toast, 7 years ago, She chose the shield instead of the word sword, and asked did if she do on purpose or it just slipped out. Serena didn't answer. He didn't see her face because that I was with his back, but he heard as she stopped breathe for half a second. That was enough answer. On purpose. She knew what she was. As she from the living room, he turned not to his room. He went to the wing. Nora, fifth sister, the youngest, guardian of the faith. Temple Wing looked different than Rest Palace. Simpler. White walls. No gold. No frescoes. Candles instead of lamps. The scent of leaf and herbs. Silence that seemed physical, as if the sound was here, could had right. Nora sat in center of the hall on stone floor. Around her in a semicircle stood 112 people in white robes, priests or novices. Nora was speaking, quietly. He couldn't hear the words, only the rhythm, steady, meted out, like a pulse. He waited at the entrance. He didn't go in until she was finished. He knew that interrupting a ritual in a believer's home was the worst possible start. The 12 figures rose, bowed, left. Nora remained seated. She knew he was standing at the entrance, knew it from the very first second. He saw how her back shifted slightly when he arrived, a micro-movement. The body reacts to the observer before the mind does. She invited him in, not with words. She turned her palm upward, a gesture of openness. He entered, sat down on the floor across from her. At the same level. That was important. You can't sit higher than Nora. With Nora, you have to be on the same level. Because in her worldview, there are only two levels, human and God. If you place yourself above her, you're claiming the place of a god. If below, you're a supplicant. Being on the same level is the only option where she sees you as a conversation partner and not an object. She spoke first. She said she sensed something foreign in him. Not bad, not good, different. As if he weren't from here. He didn't answer. He waited. She said that gods sometimes send people from other places for special purposes. She said that if he was sent, he knew it himself. If not, then his place wasn't here. He asked a question. Just one. He asked why the gods had sent him to all 5 of them, and not just to her alone. Nora froze. He saw the question sink into her. Like a stone in water, ripples spread. She believed he was sent, or wanted to believe. But if he was sent to all 5, then the gods hadn't chosen her. The gods had chosen equality, and equality meant that her faith was no greater than Alara's army, not higher than Serena's diplomacy, not higher than Vivian's spies, not higher than Lyra's machines. The equality of the 5 paths. It was heresy. And at the same time, it was the only answer that allowed her to accept cooperation. She did not answer. She closed her eyes. He realized the audience was over. He stood up. He bowed. He left. 3 sisters in 2 days. 3 questions. Each question like a mirror. Alara saw a number in the mirror. 8 months. Serena saw dependence in the mirror. Her diplomacy relies on a foreign army. Nora saw equality in the mirror. Her faith is no higher than the other 4 paths. 2 remained, Vivian and Lyra. The most difficult. Vivian because she already knew more than she should. Lyra because she didn't want to talk at all. He was walking down the hallway toward his room when they stopped him. 3 soldiers in uniform without insignia, silent, without words. 1 stood in front, 2 behind. He understood. Not Alara. Alara acts directly, not Serena. Serena acts through words, not Nora. Nora acts through faith. That left 2, Vivian or Lyra. They didn't take him to a cell, not to the basement. They took him to the garden, an enclosed courtyard with a fountain and stone benches. Vivian was sitting on the edge of the fountain, her feet in the water. It was so unexpected that he blinked. The head of Imperial Intelligence was sitting with her bare feet in the fountain. She told him to sit down. He sat down. She said she'd heard him over the phone yesterday, said he was either brave or didn't understand where he was. He replied that he understood. She asked where he was from. Nowhere, Kyle Ren. Where was he from? Silence. The fountain gurgled. He looked into her eyes, dark, unmoving. The eyes of a person who had seen too much. He told the truth. He said he was from another world. He said he had been a psychologist. He said he had died and ended up here. Vivian wasn't surprised. She didn't even blink. She said her spies had detected changes in Kyle Ren's behavior 3 days ago. A different gait, a different posture, a different look. The Kyle Ren she knew was a quiet boy with no opinions. This Kyle Ren stood before the 5 heiresses and silenced them. She said she'd considered 2 possibilities, possession by a demon or a replacement. She found no demons. That left the replacement. He asked what she planned to do with this knowledge. Vivian pulled her feet out of the water. She looked up at the sky. She said nothing for now. She said she wanted to observe. She said that a psychologist from another world who was trying to save the Empire through conversation was the most interesting thing that had happened to her in 10 years. Then she said one more thing, quieter, almost a whisper. She said she was tired of knowing everything and not being able to change it. He heard. Not the words. What lay beneath the words. Loneliness. Deep. Long-standing. The loneliness of a person who sees right through everyone and is hated for it. He didn't respond with sympathy, didn't offer help. He said one sentence. He said that knowledge without hands is an archive. Vivian looked at him. For the first time during the entire conversation, her face changed. The corner of her mouth twitched slightly. Not a smile, the shadow of a smile. She stood up, said they wouldn't touch him, for now. Said she'd remove the receiver from the room. Not because she trusted him, but because listening to him was pointless if he knew she was listening. She left. 3 soldiers followed her. He remained alone in the garden. The fountain gurgled. He sat on the bench and thought. 4 out of 5. He had set a mirror before each of them. Ilara saw the number. Serena saw the dependency. Nora saw the equality. Vivian saw herself. Lyra remained, and he wouldn't go to Lyra. Lyra must come on her own. Lyra did come. Not of the day, nor on 3rd. He wasn't surprised. People who use silently learn alone. Don't be first, because that every one time when they came them were asked to do. Fix it. Come up with something. Assemble. And not time did ask how you. He knew this guy. He him by heart. A child in a family who receives attention only when it brings benefit. Lyra was benefit. Built machines. She drew maps. Designed walls and bridges and aqueducts. The Empire used its brain as a tool and forgot to use the tool back in the box. He waited. He was with other things. On 4th day after the performance, he asked Maurice to arrange a meeting with the commanders of the garrisons. Maurice said that advisor does is the right to issue orders to the military. He replied that he didn't to give orders. He intends to listen. Maurice looked at him as a person who speaks obvious nonsense, then nodded. The meeting took place in small room. 4 commanders, the people of Ilara, tough faces, broad shoulders. Not a dozen sat until asked. Not one did spoke until he didn't asked. Discipline. The army Ilara was a machine, precise, well-oiled. He asked not about troops, not about walls, not about strategy. He asked about supplies, food, water, weapons, clothing, medicine. 4 commanders responded the same way. Supply depends on trade routes depend on contracts depend on Serena. He asked about reconnaissance. 4 answered the same way. Information regarding the horde arrives from Vivian. Without reconnaissance, Chi is blind. He asked about siege. 4 answered the same way. All new designs are by Lyra. Without her, only old catapults that fall apart after the 10th shot. He asked about mobilization. 4 answered the same way. If the horde reaches the Chi, the border of the army will enough. We need militia. A militia is the peasants. The peasants are mobilized. Churches is Nora. He didn't say anything new. He did reveal his eyes. They never already knew. Chi, every general in the empire, knew that without the other 4 branches, the army is incomplete. But know and say out loud are different things. He made them say out loud, with him, in friend. The word spoken aloud becomes a fact. A fact is harder to ignore than a thought. After meeting, he wrote everything he hear with me, not numbers, communications. The army depends on diplomacy. Diplomacy depends on the army. Both depend on intelligence. All 3 depend on science. Everything together depends on the people. 5 branches. Not one does work without the 4. The spider without 4 legs of 5. Alive but helpless. On 5th day, Lyra arrived. Not to him, to library. He was there, reading the chronicles of the provinces. It did not mean without looking at him. She went toward the shelves. I took 3 volumes. I sat at the inn corner. She opened the first volume. It didn't move. He didn't mean it her way. I kept reading. I walked hour. She flipped through the pages. He flipped through the pages. Silence. Not hostile. Not friendly. Productive. 2 people in the library is busy with their own thing. In N, she got up. She went the volumes back in their place. She walked toward the exit. She stopped at the door. She didn't turn around. She said that the blueprints for the siege engines she had drawn for her father were in the bottom drawer of the 3rd bookcase on the left. She said she no longer needed them. She left. He waited a minute. Then he walked over to the 3rd bookcase. Bottom drawer, scrolls, 6 of them. He unrolled the first one. Blueprints, precise, detailed. A new type of siege tower, a collapsible design, transported on 2 carts, assembled in an hour, withstands flaming arrows. The 2nd scroll, a double-tension ballista, range twice that of a standard one. The 3rd, a mobile shield for infantry. The 4th, a pontoon bridge. The 5th, a system of signal towers for transmitting messages. Fire at night, smoke during the day. The 6th scroll was not a blueprint. It was a letter. Lyra had written it to her father. She hadn't sent it, or she had sent it and he hadn't replied. In the letter, she asked for one thing. Not money, not a lab, not people. She asked him to come and see. Just come to the workshop and see what she had made. One line, I want you to see. He rolled up the letter, put it back, stood there for a moment. Then he took the 5 drawings and went to Alara. He found her in the lower courtyard. She was hitting the post again. He placed the blueprints on a bench by the wall. He said this was Lyra's work. He said the collapsible siege tower could be assembled in an hour. He said the ballista shot twice as far as a standard one. He said that if Alara wanted her army to be invincible, she needed one man. And that man is now sitting in the workshop in the palace basement, not speaking to anyone. Alara walked over to the bench. She picked up the tower blueprint, unfolded it, stared at it for a long time. He saw her face change. Not admiration, anger. Anger at herself. Because she didn't know. For 5 years, Lyra had been designing a weapon that could shift the balance of power on the continent. And not a single general had heard of it. Because no one had asked. Alara folded up the blueprints. She took all 5. She left without saying a word. He remained standing in the lower courtyard, sand beneath his feet, a pillar with sword notches. Silence. He hadn't brought Alara and Lyra together. He had created a need. Alara now knew she needed Lyra, not because someone told her, because she had seen the blueprints herself, understood it herself. He hadn't reconciled them. He had created a dependency, visible, conscious. The next step was harder. Serena and Alara. 7 years, one word, shield. He returned to the room, sat on the floor, thought. The problem with Serena and Alara wasn't the word. The word was a symptom. The disease ran deeper. Alara had spent her whole life proving that she was a leader, not a shield, not a wall, not a tool, a leader, a person who leads. Serena, with a single word in front of 300 witnesses, said no. You don't lead, you cover. It was a public humiliation. But not only that, it was the truth. And Alara knew it. An army defends. It doesn't attack. It doesn't lead. It doesn't decide. It defends. Alara hated Serena not for the word, for the truth behind the word. You can't fix this with a direct conversation. You can't put them in a room together and tell them to talk. They'll talk. With swords. A different approach is needed. He needed a situation where Alara would lead, not defend, lead, and Serena would see it. Then the word shield would cease to be a sentence, because Alara would prove to herself that it wasn't true. He didn't need Serena to apologize. He needed Alara to stop needing an apology. He lay down on the bed, closed his eyes. The tube in the wall was gone. Vivian had kept her word, or moved the tube somewhere he wouldn't find it. With Vivian, both possibilities were equally likely. He smiled. For the first time in 5 days in this world. On the 6th day, he was summoned to the throne room. All 5 sisters. Maurice stood by the door, pale. His hands were shaking more than usual. He asked what had happened. Maurice said one word. Scouts. He entered the hall. 5 chairs. 5 sisters. Vivian spoke. Calmly. Quietly. Without emotion. Her scouts had returned from the eastern border. The horde had accelerated. 3 months ago, it was 1,000 leagues away. Now 600. The nomads weren't walking. They were galloping. Something was driving them, or someone was calling them. Vivian said that according to her calculations, the horde would be at the Empire's eastern border in 4 months. Not 8, as Alara had thought. 4. The hall was silent. He stood on his circle in the center. He looked at the 5 faces. Alara turned pale. She had been counting. 4 months isn't 8. 4 months is nothing. Serena gripped the armrests of her chair. Diplomacy doesn't work at the speed of cavalry. Lyra stared at the floor. Her machines were on blueprints, not on the walls. Nora prayed, silently. Her lips moved. Vivian looked at him. Only at him. She was waiting. He understood. She had rushed the report. She could have waited a day, a week, delivered the information more gently. But she delivered it now, in front of everyone, abruptly, because she wanted to see what he would do. It was a test. And at the same time, it was a gift, because nothing unites people faster than fear. He took a step forward. For the first time in 6 days, he spoke to all 5 of them at once. He said that each of them had an answer to part of the question, and none of them had an answer to the whole question. He said that 4 months was too short for 5 separate armies, and long enough for one. Then he fell silent, turned around, left, let them sit on it. The night after the council, he did sleep. He sat on floor. He was drawing a diagram on back map which I found in library. 5 circles, 5 names, lines between them. The thickness of the lines indicated the strength of the connection. Almost all lines were thin, some dotted. One between Alara and Serena was crossed out. He added a 6th circle, his, small, in center. From it ran 5 lines, thin but unbroken. He was connected to each one. For a while, weakly, but connected. Now I need it. For the lines between sisters became thicker. Not through him, directly. That's that. The intermediary who connects everything on himself becomes narrow bottleneck. If you remove the system will, and it could be in any at. In the morning, he went to Vivian. He, in her office. The room without windows in the wing. The door is black, no handle. He knocked. The door opened on its own. Inside was dark. A single candle on the table. Cards on the walls. Threads, strings, points on maps. Red, blue, white. The network. He discovered the system. He saw similar in movies about detectives, only this was the real one. Vivian sat at the table. She was reading the report. She take her eyes. He sat across without invitation. She didn't objected. He said that he needed information, not intelligence. Information about sisters. Who with who was for the a week. Who wrote to whom. Who avoided. Vivian raised her eyes. She looked at him. She asked why she help. He replied. He said that she 10 years has been information that no one does uses. He said that he the only person who will use her data, not for blackmail, but for that to fix that is broken. He said that for her, this a chance to turn knowledge into action, archive into a tool. Vivian remained silent. Then she opened the drawer. I took out a folder, a thin one. I placed in front of him. I said that this report for the 7 days. He opened the folder. He read. Alara, after the meeting, held 3 hours in the armory, alone, then called 2 commanders. We talked until morning. Serena sent a pigeon to the port city Almeria. This is unknown. Probably the query regarding the status of the fleet. Lyra did exceed from the workshop for days. I ordered through online hardware. A lot iron. Nora doubled the number prayer meetings. 3 a day instead of the usual 1.5. He put the folder. Each of 5 reacted to the news about the horde in her own way. Ilara was preparing an army. Serena checked resources. Lyra began to build. Nora mobilized faith. 4 of 5 began working, each in its direction, each separately. This was better than nothing, but it was not enough. Parallel lines do intersect. He needed were points of intersection. He asked Vivian about 5th name in the report, about her herself. What's she? Vivian smiled. The first time we move him. She said that had sent 6 agents to the eastern border, 2 to Horde, 4 to border towns. She said that in 2 weeks she know the board of the leader, his habits, his weaknesses, how many horses, how many bows, how many days of crit of food. He nodded. He asked why she hadn't report about it too. The Vivian replied, she said that at the council every sister hears only herself. If she says that she spies, Alara decides that Vivian is meddling into military affairs. Serena decides that Vivian is acting on her back. Nora decides that spying is a sin. Lyra will hear at all. He understood. Vivian didn't hide the information out of greed. She hid it because the system couldn't process information. 5 ears, but not a single brain to process the signal in its entirety. He told Vivian that he needed a channel, not a pipe in the wall, a proper line of communication between them. Fast. Secret. She nodded. She said that every morning at 6 o'clock there would be a stone lying by the fountain in the garden. Under the stone, a note. If there was no note, it meant everything was as before. He agreed. He stood up. He walked to the door. He stopped at the door. He said that in a week he would need something more from her than just notes. He would need her to talk to Lyra. Not as a spy, as a sister. Vivian didn't answer. He left. He spent the next 2 days in the throne room. Not with all 5 of them, one at a time. He started with Serena. He asked her to compile a list of all the trade agreements that would be affected if the eastern border fell. Serena compiled it. The list took up 4 pages, 62 treaties. Grain trade, metal trade, textile trade, spices, timber. 62 treaties, hundreds of thousands of gold pieces a year. All of it would collapse if the horde breached the border. He asked her to make a copy of the list, to take one copy to Alara. Serena narrowed her eyes. She asked why. He said that Alara measures defense in soldiers. Serena measures it in treaties. If Alara sees that standing behind her walls are not just people, but 62 treaties, then the walls will become more important to her. Not because he asked, because numbers are more convincing than words. Serena looked at him for a long time. Then she said he was manipulating them. He replied, "He said that manipulation is when a person is forced to do something that harms them. He was forcing them to do what would save the empire. If that was manipulation, then surgery was manipulation too." Serena smiled, a genuine smile, not a diplomatic one. She said she liked him, and that it bothered her. She left, with the list. He didn't know if she'd take a copy to Alara, but he knew Serena. Serena wouldn't miss the chance to show Alara that without her, the empire would lose 62 treaties. It wasn't generosity. It was a demonstration. But a demonstration in the right direction. Sometimes the right action is taken for the wrong reason. The therapist is fine with that. The next day, he found the first note from Vivian under a rock in the garden. A short one. Alara had received the list. She hadn't thrown it away. She'd read it for 2 hours. She'd summoned the treasurer. He smiled. It was working. Slowly. Fragile. But it worked. Alara began to see that behind the walls lay an economy, not just stone. Serena began to see that her lists meant exactly as much as Alara's army was worth. 2 threads, thin, between 2 sisters who hadn't spoken in 7 years. Not friendship, not reconciliation, a mutual understanding of dependence, enough for a start. Now Lyra. He was heading to the workshop, the palace basement, a long corridor, a low ceiling, the smell of oil and burnt metal, the clang of hammers, the clatter. He descended the stairs and entered a space he hadn't expected to see in the palace. Lyra's workshop was the size of the throne room, high vaulted ceiling, dozens of tables, blueprints on each one, parts, models, mechanisms. 15 people worked in silence, each at their own table. Lyra stood in the center. Her hands were covered in oil up to her elbows. Her hair was tied back in a bun. She was assembling something out of iron and wood. Not a model, a full-scale part, a component of a ballista. He recognized it from the blueprint he'd seen in the library. She noticed him. She didn't stop. She kept working. He didn't approach. He stood at the entrance. He watched. He waited. 10 minutes. 20. 30. She finished securing it, wiped her hands with a rag, looked at him, asked if he had come with a question, like everyone else. He said no, said he had come to look, just to see what she had made. Lyra froze, for a second, a brief one, almost imperceptible, but he noticed, because for 13 years he had noticed such moments. The moment when a person hears what they have been waiting for a very long time. She didn't cry. She didn't smile. She didn't thank him. She nodded and began to show him. She led him through the workshop, table by table, drawing after drawing, a double-tension ballista, a collapsible siege tower, a signal fire system, a new alloy for arrowheads, a gate-lifting mechanism that works twice as fast as the standard one. She spoke evenly, technically, without emotion. But she showed him everything, every detail, every mechanism, every scroll. For the first time, someone had come to look. For the first time, someone was listening. He watched and listened and memorized. Not the drawings, the person. Lyra was not an engineer. Lyra was an artist who had been forced to make weapons. Her drawings were beautiful. Not functionally beautiful, beautiful like drawings. The lines precise and at the same time graceful. The captions neat as calligraphy, She put into every drawing not only calculations, but something else. Something no one noticed because no one was looking. He spent 2 hours in the workshop. When he left, he said one thing. He said that Alara had taken her drawings from the library, all 5 of them, and she'd been reading them for 3 hours. Lyra didn't say anything, but when he turned at the door, she was standing in the same spot, watching him go. The expression he'd seen 100 times. The look of someone who'd just been told for the first time that their work had been seen. On 10th day, in the first clash, not between sisters, between them people, soldiers from the garrison, Alara struck the priest Nora in Lower Town. The reason was trivial. The priest was in the square. He spoke that horde is God's punishment for the work of the imperial house. The soldier listened. Then he stopped listen. The priest lost 2 teeth. The word was sitting in the guardhouse. Nora demanded execution. Alara demanded her release. The news reached to Kayla via a note Vivian. A short one. 2 sentences. A soldier beats the priest. Nora and Alara at the edge. He went didn't to Nora, not to Alara, to Serena. Serena was the only one who could lead the negotiations without losing face. This was her job, her territory, her strength. He found Serena in the living room, told what had happened. Serena listened. She interrupted. When he finished, she asked why he came to her, but did decide it himself. He replied. He said that if he decides the conflict himself, then will become the judge. The judge is power. Power is a threat. He cannot be a threat because that then cease a bridge, and bridge is more necessary a judge. Serena was watching at him. Then she nodded. She said that take care it. 3 hours, the conflict, the matter was settled. The soldier apologized to the priest. In public, right there in the square, the priest accepted it. Nora received an apology and a concession. Alara got the soldier back alive and unpunished, save for public humiliation. Serena got what she wanted most of all, the acknowledgement that without her, this court would fall apart in a week. He watched from the window as the soldier bowed to the priest. He thought about what had just happened. Serena had resolved the conflict between Nora and Alara, not him, Serena. For the first time in 7 years, Serena had done something for Alara, not against her, for her. Yes, she'd done it for herself, for her reputation, for power. But the result was the same. The thread between Serena and Alara had grown slightly thicker, the thread between Serena and Nora too. He noted this on the diagram. 2 lines had grown slightly thicker, slightly, but noticeably. On the 11th day, he did something he hadn't done since the first day. He requested a meeting with all 5 of them at once. Not in the throne room, in the small conference room, a round table. No throne, no raised platforms, no chairs that differed from one another. 5 identical chairs. He asked Maurice to arrange it. Maurice said the heirs wouldn't sit on identical chairs. He said that was precisely why the chairs had to be identical. Maurice left, shaking his head. The sisters arrived. Not all at once. Alara first. She looked at the chair. She frowned. She sat down. Serena second. She looked at the chair. She smiled. She understood the plan. She sat down. Vivian was already sitting when he entered, as always. Lyra came in last, except for Nora. She looked at the chair. Not at the chair. At the table. She saw that it was round. He saw how she noted that. An engineer's mind. A round table. No head seat. Nora entered. She looked at the chairs. She closed her eyes for a second. She opened them. She sat down. He stood. Didn't sit down. Because there was no chair for him. On purpose. He isn't part of the circle. He's outside it. A mediator doesn't fit into the system. He began to speak. Said that in 3.5 months, 100,000 horsemen would be at the eastern wall. Said that each of them had begun preparing over the last 10 days. Separately. Alara is reinforcing the garrisons. Serena is checking trade routes. Lyra is building machines. Nora is gathering people. Vivian is gathering data. 5 actions. 5 directions. 0 coordination. He said that the horde isn't 5 separate problems. It's one problem with 5 dimensions. and it can only be solved if the 5 dimensions become a single system. Then he fell silent. He waited. Alara spoke first. She said she agreed. But coordination means command, and there must be one command, and that command is hers. Serena immediately objected. She said that war isn't just about swords. Logistics, supplies, allies. Command must take everything into account. Nora said that the people won't follow a general. The people would follow faith. Lyra said that without siege engines, the walls would fall in a month, and asked who would decide what to build first. Vivian was silent. 4 voices, 4 claims to leadership. He listened. He didn't interrupt. He waited for them to finish speaking. 3 minutes. 5. 7. The voices grew louder. Alara stood up. Serena stood up. Nora raised her hand as if in prayer. Lyra turned away. He said one word. He said, "Stop." Quietly. He didn't shout. He almost whispered. 5 heads turned toward him. He said that none of them would be in command, and neither would he. The table would command. This table, the round one, at which each was responsible for her own dimension, and none was higher than the other. Not a war council with a commander-in-chief, a coordinating council with 5 equal votes. Alara said that's not how wars are fought. He replied that they never had been. That's why they needed to try it. Because those who fought the old way had already been burned by the horde. 3 kingdoms, 3 armies with 1 commander, 3 defeats. Silence. 10 seconds. Serena spoke up. She said she was ready to try, if each area of responsibility was clearly defined. Lyra nodded. She said she needed a list of priorities for construction, and she would make it if she was given the data. Nora said the temples would start preparing the militia if they received protection from the army. Alara was silent. She looked at the table, at the round tabletop. He could see her calculating. Not numbers, options. Ilara was a soldier, but she wasn't a fool. She understood she couldn't handle this alone. She understood after Serena's list. She understood after Lyra's blueprints. Ilara said she agreed, on one condition. If the horde reaches the walls, command passes to her. In battle, a single voice is needed. He looked at the other 4. Serena nodded. Lyra nodded. Nora nodded. Vivian tilted her head slightly. That was consent. He said the first council meeting would be tomorrow morning. Each would bring a report on her area of responsibility. Facts. Numbers. Not opinions. Facts. The 5 sisters left. Not together. One by one. But they left through the same door. A small thing. A symbol. He remained alone at the round table. He sat in Alara's chair. He looked at the 5 seats. 5 empty chairs. For the first time in the Empire's history, the 5 heirs had agreed to equality. Fragile, temporary, forced, but they had agreed. He placed his hands on the table. The wood was warm. He thought that in a past life, this moment would have been called a breakthrough. The first joint session had gone without bloodshed. In his experience, that was considered a success. The first meeting of the call began with silence. 5 sisters, 5 chairs, round table. It stood against the wall. Every brought a report, as he had asked. Facts, numbers. Ilara put the Cloney Fund a showing of the garrisons. 19,000 soldiers, 6 fortresses in the Eastern Front. 3 of them needed repair. The walls were cracked. The gate have warped. The barracks are designed for 2/3 of the current garrison. Serena placed a trade map next to it. Supply routes. 14 main routes. 6 of them passed through territories that would be the first to come under attack by the horde. The loss of 6 routes meant the loss of 40% of the food supply for the eastern garrisons. Lyra put down the list. 23 units of siege equipment that could be built in 3 months, provided that iron, wood, craftsmen, She itemized every position, how much material, how many people, how many days, accurate to the last unit. Nora placed a scroll in front of her. A census of temples by province. 412 temples, each capable of mobilizing between 50 and 300 militiamen. Total potential, up to 50,000. Untrained, but numerous. Vivian didn't put anything down. She spoke up, said that her agents in the Horde had relayed the first intelligence. The leader's name is Togrul, not a savage, a tactician. The 3 kingdoms he burned, he did not take by storm. He forced them to surrender. Cut off trade routes, poisoned wells, burned crops, waited. When hunger reached the walls, the city opened its gates of its own accord. Silence. 5 faces. He watched their reactions. Alara clenched her fist. She understood. Togrul won't bang against the walls. He'll go around. He'll strangle them. Walls are useless if there's famine behind them. Serena turned pale. 6 trade routes, 40% of the food supply. Togrul will strike right there, not the fortresses, the food. Lyra looked at her list. 23 siege engines are useless if the enemy doesn't storm the walls. She needs other machines, not for defense, for a counterattack. Nora was silent. 50,000 militiamen without food turned into 50,000 starving rioters. He watched as the information sank in. One fact from Vivian. Togrul isn't storming the fortresses, and all 4 plans are collapsing at once. It hurt, but it was necessary. Better to find out now than in 3 months when the Horde is at the border. Alara spoke first. She said we need to change strategy, not defense. Mobile units, protecting supply routes, not walls. Serena picked up on it. She said she could reroute some trade routes to the southern paths. Longer, more expensive, but safer. Lyra said she could build fortified warehouses along the new routes. Quick-build structures, not fortresses. Transit points. Nora said that the temples in the eastern provinces could serve as food collection points. They have storage facilities, large ones, for grain for the poor. Vivian said that her agents could track the Horde's vanguard movements and warn them a week before an attack on each route. He listened. He didn't interfere. For the first time, the 5 voices weren't speaking against each other, but in support of one another. Each picked up where the last left off. Alara proposed. Serena added. Lyra specified. Nora offered resources. Vivian provided data. A chain. Fragile, but a chain. He let the conversation continue for 40 minutes. Then he intervened. He said that everything they had discussed required one thing. A single schedule. Who does what? By when? With what resources? He said he suggested that Lyra draw up this schedule because she was the only one who thought in systems. Lyra looked up. She looked at him. Then at the sisters. Alara nodded, briefly. It wasn't a sign of respect. It was an acknowledgement of competence. But for Lyra, it was the first time. Serena nodded. Nora nodded. Vivian tilted her head. Lyra said she would draw up the schedule in 2 days. The meeting ended. The sisters were leaving. Alara lingered. She approached him, quietly, so the others wouldn't hear. She said that Lyra's blueprints were impressive. She said she hadn't known. Her voice was steady, but he heard what lay beneath the words. Shame. Alara was ashamed that she hadn't known, that she hadn't asked, that the younger sister had worked in the basement for 5 years, and the older one had never once gone down there. He didn't tell her that. No need. She already knew. He just nodded. Alara left. He stood alone in the room. A round table, 5 chairs, maps and lists on the table. It was working. They weren't a team yet. They were 5 people sitting at one table and not trying to kill each other. In his past life, this was called the second stage. The first is denial. We're not a family, we're competitors. The second is working side by side. We're not together, but we're at the same table. The third will be the hardest. The third stage is when what everyone has been hiding comes pouring out. Resentments, traumas, the real reasons. He knew it was coming. and he knew that when it came, the round table might not hold. The note from Vivian the next morning was longer than usual. 3 sentences. Serena sent the pigeon last night, not to Almera, to Cassar, the capital of the southern neighbor. The contents are unknown. He reread the note. Cassar, the southern neighbor. Not a trading partner, a political one. Serena wasn't writing to merchants. She was writing to rulers. Why? He didn't know. But he knew that Serena never does anything without a plan, and that a letter to Cassar, sent secretly 2 weeks after the emperor's death, meant one of 2 things. Either she was seeking an ally against the horde, or she was seeking an ally against her sisters. He folded the note, hid it in his boot, went to have breakfast. The knife and the cheese didn't appear again. That didn't reassure him. He did go to Serena with a question about Cassar. This was a mistake. To ask means to show that he knows. To show that he knows means to show that Vivian works for him. Show that Vivian is for him means to lose Vivian. He did differently. He went to library. I was looking everything I could find about Cassar. Found it. Cassar. Kingdom to south of the empire. The old dynasty. Rich. Weak militarily. Population 3 million. Army 10,000. Trade with the empire with 3 sea routes. The ruler of Cassar. King Dorian. 40 years old. Not married. Known for things. Caution and greed. He paused to think. Why is Serena right to Dorian? Not for military aid. 10,000 soldiers from Cassardid will decide against thousands nomads. Money. Serena writes about money. Or for something that is more money. For marriage. It sat down. He looked at ceiling of the library. Marriage. Serena offers Dorian marriage. Not love. An alliance. Cassar enters a connection with the empire through one of heirs. Serena receives resources Cassara, gold, ships, ports, and, trump card, married heiress with a foreign king, with, behind this, just diplomat. This candidate to thee from external support. He closed the book. That was a problem. Serena wasn't looking an ally for the empire. Serena was looking for an ally for herself. Coordinating council, round table, equality. This was a smokescreen. Behind the Serena was her game. He could tell the others. He could show the note to Vivian. But that will blow the council. Ilara will see betrayal. Nora will see sin. Lyra will see confirmation that no one can. Vivian will see that he is using her information as a weapon. He could afford himself not a single of these consequences. It is necessary was approach. He thought for hours, then went to Serena. Not a question about Cassar, with a suggestion. Found her in the blue living room, alone, without suitors. I watched tea from a thin cup. He sat down. He said that he had had an idea. He said that the empire need allies. Not through 3 months. Now. He said that Serena is the only one who can tell this ensure, but not alone, and through the council. He said that if she presents a plan unions for next meeting, and the council will approves, that everyone union will strengthened, not her name, but the name all 5. Serena set the cup down, carefully, slowly. He saw as she counts. She counted quickly. The union approved by 5 is stronger alliance concluded by 1. This fact. Dorian Kasarski doesn't not one heiress, but full the empire. This more valuable. Serena receives the same resources, but without risk, without secret letters, without that Vivian finding out. He didn't say that Vivian already knows. No need. Serena was smart. She understood that the secret lives exactly as the head of Serena asked what he wanted in return. He said nothing. He said that he, for the empire, survived the winter. Serena watched at him, for a long time, then said that he was a saint or an idiot. She said that in both cases it not long to live in the court. He smiled. He said that this, the best compliment he had, he those time, as got here. Serena didn't smile, but she stopped hold cup as a weapon. She put it on table. This was a no of disarmament, a small one, but genuine. She said that present a plan to the board. He stood up. He thanked them. He to the door. I stopped. He said that in regard unions there be the word marriage. Only trade, only military aid, only resources. Marriage is a personal decision made after the war, not before. Serena didn't answer. He left. In the hallway, he exhaled. It had been the most dangerous conversation since he'd arrived in this world. He hadn't accused Serena. He hadn't exposed her. He didn't threaten her. He gave her the best option. Instead of a secret letter, an open plan. Instead of a personal alliance, an imperial one. Instead of risk, safety. Serena was too smart to refuse, and too proud to admit she'd been outmaneuvered. In his past life, this was called redirection. The client is heading in a destructive direction. You can't say stop. You can suggest a turn, so that the client thinks they turned on their own. 3 days until the next council meeting. He used them. He spent the first day with Lyra. She was drawing up a schedule. He sat beside her. He didn't help. He didn't interfere. He was present. Lyra worked and sometimes spoke, not about the schedule, about mechanisms, about alloys, about how double tension works. He listened, nodded, asked questions, not clever ones, honest ones. He didn't understand engineering, and he didn't pretend to understand. Lyra saw that, and for the first time, in his presence, she relaxed. She stopped speaking in formulas. She started speaking with her hands. She demonstrated. She drew in the air. She traced lines on the table with her finger. He'd seen this before. A person speaking for the first time not to a colleague, but to a listener. The difference is enormous. To a colleague, you explain. To a listener, you tell a story. He spent the second day with Maurice. The old man knew the palace like the back of his hand. Every corridor, every room, every secret passage. He asked Maurice to show him the secret passages. Maurice refused. He said the passages were a state secret. He asked whose state secret exactly, Morris's or Vivian's? Morris fell silent. Then he said that Vivian knew about the passages, but not all of them. The Emperor showed Morris 3 passages that even Vivian didn't know about, just in case, as a last resort. He didn't ask to be shown them. He just memorized that they existed. 3 routes out of the palace that no one knows except the old secretary. A safety net. On the 3rd day, Vivian came. Alone. Without soldiers. Without a note. She came to his room. In the morning. He hadn't gotten up yet. She was standing by the window when he opened his eyes. He didn't flinch. 13 years of practice. Clients could be unpredictable. One had once waited for him in his office half an hour before their appointment, sitting in the dark. Vivian said that Serena had recalled the pigeon from Kesar. The new letter hadn't been sent. He sat up in bed. So it had worked. Serena had chosen the open path. Vivian said he was a dangerous man, not because he was strong, but because he changed the rules of the game and others didn't notice. He replied that that was his job, to change the rules so that everyone won and no one noticed that the rules had changed. Vivian sat on the edge of the table. It was her first time in his space. Not in the garden, not in her own office. In his room. It was a statement. I trust you enough to be on your turf. She said the agents in the Horde had relayed new intelligence. Togrul had divided the Horde into 3 columns. The central one is heading straight for the eastern wall. The northern one is taking a detour through the mountain pass. The southern one is heading for the coast. 3 strikes at once. Not a siege, an encirclement. He stood up. He walked over to the wall where the map hung. He looked at it. 3 columns. The central one presses against the walls. The northern one approaches from the flank through the mountains. The southern one cuts off the ports. If the southern column takes the coast, Serena's trade routes are dead. If the northern column passes through the pass, Alara's garrisons will be surrounded. If the central column ties down the main forces in battle, no help will come from either the south or the north. He asked Vivian how many men were in each column. Vivian said there were no exact figures, roughly 40,000 in the center, 30,000 on each flank. He closed his eyes. 4 months, 3 columns, 30,000 on the coast. The coast is Serena. 30,000 in the mountains. The mountains are Alara. 40,000 at the walls. The walls are all of them together. He opened his eyes. He told Vivian that this information must be presented to the council. Not through him, through her. Vivian said the sisters don't trust her data. They think she's manipulating the information. He said that's exactly why she has to present the data in person, openly, with maps, with sources. For the first time in her life, show not the result, but the method. Don't say, I was told. Say, here's my agent, here's his route, here's what he saw. Transparency. Vivian looked at him as if he'd suggested she strip naked in the town square. For the head of intelligence, revealing the method is the same as a soldier throwing away his sword. He said he understood, and that's exactly why it would work, because no one expects it. Because transparency from Vivian is the most powerful weapon of trust that exists. Vivian was silent, for a long time. Then she stood up. She walked to the door. At the door, she said she'd think about it. She left. He stood by the chart. 3 columns, 3 months. 5 sisters who, 10 days ago, couldn't sit at the same table. He thought that in a past life, the most difficult cases were those where the family came not because they wanted to, but because the court ordered them to. Here, the court was called a horde of 100,000 horsemen. The motivation was repulsive, but effective. The council gathered for 14th day. 5 chairs, round table, map in center. Serena began. She presented a plan: alliances. 3 kingdoms in the south and the west. Kasar, trade union. Military aid in exchange for preferential duties after the war. Miravan, kingdom in the western coast. Fleet, 12 combat ships, in exchange for access to the northern forests for shipbuilding. Talvor, mountain duchy in the northwest, guides across the passes, knowledge of trails, in exchange for protection against raids after victory. Serena spoke calmly, confidently. Every conjunction was calculated. Every cost is justified. Not word about defects, not hint. He stood by the wall and looked at faces. Ilara listened, nodded at Talvor. Mountain guides. This had military significance. Lyra listened. She nodded at Miraven. Ships. That had logistical sense. Nora listened silently. Vivian listened in silence. When Serena finished, Ilara asked how time it to conclude alliances. Serena replied, "A month. The pigeons have sent. The replies will arrive in 2 weeks. In 2 weeks of formalities." Ilara nodded. That was new. Ilara agreed with the plan Serena, without arguing, without conditions, without attempt to take the initiative. A small step, a huge for 2 women who 7 years had talked. Then, Vivian. Vivian. He held his breath. He did what she had decided. I didn't will whether the method or will reveal a report, as usual. Vivian came to the map. She took out her 3 small figurines, cut from wood, horsemen. I placed on the table, 1 in center at east wall, 1 on north at the pass, 1 to south at the coast. 3 columns. She spoke. She said that her agent named Ren sneaked into the column under the guise a blacksmith. He was with a horde for days. I counted the tents. I counted the campfires. I counted horses. 40. 40 in the center. Well armed. Many bows. Few siege equipment. Togrul does plan to storm the walls. He plans to press, for now they open. Second agent. A woman named Sai. works as a fabric merchant in a border town in the south. Saw the southern column on the march. 30,000. Light cavalry. Fast. No supply trains. They don't intend to occupy the coast. They intend to sweep through it like fire and leave. Destroy the ports. Burn the warehouses. Deprive the empire of the sea. Third agent. Name not given. Works in the mountains. Northern column. 30,000. Heavy infantry. Not cavalry. The mountains aren't for horses. They're slower. They'll arrive later. But when they do, holding the pass will be nearly impossible. Vivian fell silent. The room was silent. He looked at the faces. Ilara looked at the figures on the map. She was counting. Serena looked at the southern figure. Ports. Her ports. Lyra looked at the northern one. The mountain pass. There are no fortifications there. Nora looked at Vivian. Not at the map. At Vivian. He saw Nora's expression change. Not pity. Not fear. Respect. For the first time, Vivian had shown not the result, but the cost of the result. 3 agents, 3 lives on the line. 3 people who risked dying every day so that these 5 women could sit around a round table and plan. Nora saw that, and it changed something in her view of Vivian. Before, Nora had seen a spy. Dirty methods, lies as a tool. Now she saw a sacrifice. 3 people sacrificing themselves. That was a language Nora understood. Sacrifice. Service. The price. He hadn't planned it. Vivian hadn't planned it. But transparency had achieved what 10 years of secrecy couldn't. One honest presentation had changed more than 1,000 secret memos. The meeting continued. Ilara unfolded the map wider. She began to draw defensive lines. 3 directions, 3 responses. The eastern wall, the main forces, 20,000 out of 29. The task is to hold the central column, not to defeat it, to hold it, to tie it down, not to let it break through. The southern coast, 5,000 cavalry, fast, mobile units. Don't stand your ground, strike and retreat. Burn the bridges behind the column. Slow them down. Nora said that the temples on the coast could evacuate the population and supplies inland before the southern column arrived. Ilara looked at her. She nodded. This was the second connection between Ilara and Nora. The first was through the conflict with the priest. This one was through the plan. The northern pass. Ilara fell silent. She looked at the map. The pass was narrow. If fortified, 5,000 could hold off 30,000. But there were no fortifications. 3 months to build them. She looked at Lyra. Lyra was already calculating. He could see her lips moving. Numbers, stone, wood, time, people. Lyra said it was possible. Fortifications at the pass in 3 months. But not walls. There wouldn't be time for walls. Barriers, traps, narrow passages blocked with stone. The pass like a funnel. 30,000 enter. 5,000 are enough to hold them there, if built correctly. Ilara asked what was needed. Lyra gave a list. 300 workers, iron, ropes, tools, engineers from her workshop. And one thing Ilara hadn't expected. Guides. People who know the mountains. Ilara turned to Serena, Talvor, the mountain principality. Guides through the passes. Serena nodded. She said she would include this in the negotiations with Talvor, as a priority. 3 lines, 3 sisters, bound by a single task. Ilara provides soldiers. Lyra builds fortifications. Serena negotiates for guides. For the southern coast. Serena secures the routes. Nora evacuates the people. Ilara provides cavalry. For the eastern wall. Ilara holds the defense. Vivian provides reconnaissance. Lyra builds machines. Nora mobilizes the militia. He looked at the map and saw lines, not on paper, between people. Each task connected at least 2 sisters. Each connection was functional, not emotional, not friendly, functional. But that wasn't necessary. He didn't need them to love each other. He needed them to depend on each other, consciously, visibly, irrevocably. The council meeting ended 3 hours later, the longest one yet. As the sisters were leaving, Lyra lingered. She approached him, quietly. She said the schedule was ready. She handed him the scroll. He unrolled it. A table, precise, detailed. Every action scheduled by the day, every dependency noted, every resource calculated. It wasn't a table. It was a map to salvation. In the margins, Lyra had added a single line. "Thank you for coming to look." He rolled up the scroll. He looked at Lyra. She was already leaving. She didn't turn around. He stood alone in the hall. A round table, 5 chairs, a map with 3 wooden horsemen, a scroll in his hand. 14 days. 5 sisters who, 14 days ago, had wanted to destroy one another were now sitting at the same table and planning their defense. Not because they'd made peace, because they were afraid of the same thing. Fear. The worst motivator, but the only one that works fast. He tucked the scroll into his shirt. He went to his room. On the way, he stopped by the window. The east. Mountains. Beyond the mountains, the steppe. Beyond the steppe, 100,000 people marching this way. 3 columns. 3 months. He looked at his hands. Slender. Young. Without calluses. Hands that had never held a sword. But those hands had just done what no sword could do. They had forced 5 men to sit down and listen to one another. He clenched his fists, unclenched them. He walked on. On 18th day, he barely collapsed. It started with trifle, just always. Ilara sent thousands soldiers to Northern Pass for construct fortifications. Lyra sent with them 30 engineers and blueprints. Soldiers arrived first. The other of the named Tarek, decided not to wait the engineers. He started, build yourself. According to old blueprints, stone walls across the pass. When the engineers of Lyra arrived across 2 days, half of the work was done. Incorrect. The wall stood, not there, not under that angle. Not from that stone, Lyra realized, from senior engineer. She rushed to Ilara, not to advice, personally, demanded to stop the construction, tear down the wall, start over, along the blueprints. Ilara refused. She said that 2 people were 4 days. She said that tear down and start over is to lose a week. She said that a wall is a wall. Lyra said that a wall in the wrong place is worse than no wall at all, because the enemy will see the wall and go around it. But if there's no wall, he'll walk right into the funnel Lyra designed. Ilara said that an engineer doesn't tell a general where to put walls. Lyra said that a general who doesn't listen to an engineer ends up with walls that fall. Ilara stood up. Lyra didn't back down. He found out about it through a note from Vivian. 2 lines. Ilara and Lyra. The pass. Bad. He ran. Didn't walk. Ran. Through the corridors. Down the stairs. To Ilara's office. He walked in without knocking. Ilara was standing at the desk. Lyra was standing across from her. Between them was a map of the pass. Both were silent. The silence was worse than a scream. A scream is a release. After a scream, it's easier. Silence is pressure. After silence, an explosion. He stood between them, not physically, with his voice. He said he wanted to understand. He asked Ilara to explain Tarek's decision. Ilara explained. Tarek is a military man. 20 years of experience. He saw the wall. He knew where to place it. He placed it. He nodded. He asked Lyra to explain the problem. Lyra explained. The pass has 3 levels: upper, middle, lower. Tarek's wall is on the middle level. It blocks the passage, but the enemy can climb to the upper level and bypass it. Lyra's wall was supposed to be on the lower level, not to block, but to guide, to create a funnel, to drive the enemy into a narrow spot where their numerical advantage disappears. He turned to Ilara. He asked one thing. He asked if she had been to the pass herself. Alara was silent. 2 seconds. 3. No, she hadn't. Tarek had. She trusted Tarek. He turned to Lyra. He asked if she had been to the pass. Lyra said yes, twice, with her father, as a child. She remembered every rock. She didn't trace the route on a map. She did it from memory. He didn't say who was right. He didn't take sides. He said the decision had to be based on the location, not on experience or memory. He suggested sending one of Lyra's engineers and one of Alara's officers to the pass, together, to inspect it, report back, decide on the spot. Alara looked at him, then at Lyra, then at the map. She said she agreed. Lyra said she agreed. Both left, through different doors. He was left alone. He sat down in Alara's chair, heavy, oak. He closed his eyes. It wasn't a disaster. It was inevitable. The first real conflict between two sisters who had started working together. In his experience, this always happened. A family takes its first steps, begins to cooperate, and immediately stumbles. Because cooperation isn't agreement. It's a clash of different ways of thinking. Alara thinks like a soldier. A wall is a wall. Put it up and hold it. Lyra thinks like an engineer. A wall is a function. Place determines meaning. Both are right. Both are incomplete. Together, they are more complete. But for that, they need to learn to stumble and not fall. 4 days later, a report came back from the pass. The engineer and the officer had surveyed the terrain. Together. The report was unanimous. Lyra is right. Tarek's wall isn't in the right place. The upper level allows for a bypass. A funnel on the lower level is more effective. Alara ordered the wall torn down. Start over. Based on Lyra's blueprints. A loss of 5 days. Painful, but not fatal. He learned something else from the report. Alara's officer had added a single line at the bottom. Lyra's engineer knows the mountains better than our scouts. I recommend involving him in route planning. 1 line. At the bottom, almost an afterthought. But to him, it meant more than the entire defense plan. Because it was the first time one of Alara's people had recognized the value of one of Lyra's people. Not a sister recognizing a sister. People recognizing people. The system began to function not only at the level of the 5 seats, but at the level of those standing behind the seats. On the 22nd day, the second event occurred. Serena received a reply from Kassar. King Dorian had agreed to a trade alliance. Gold, grain, 20 ships for transporting supplies. The price was high. Preferential tariffs for 15 years. Access to 3 ports. But it was acceptable. Serena presented the response to the council. Alara approved. Lyra approved. Nora approved. Vivian approved with a reservation. She said that Dorian was cunning and they needed to check for hidden conditions. Serena said she would check. No hard feelings, no defensiveness. She accepted the comment. He noted that. Serena accepted Vivian's criticism, publicly, without a protective smile, without diplomatic phrasing. She simply nodded and said she would check. Another thread, a thin one, between Serena and Vivian, built not on trust, on respect for competence. The reply from Miravan arrived 3 days later. 12 ships. The terms were acceptable. The reply from Talvor came last. Guides, 50 men, who knew every trail in the mountains. An unexpected condition. The Prince of Talvor asked for neither money nor protection. He asked that his youngest son be allowed to study in Lyra's workshop. The boy wanted to be an engineer. When Serena read this condition aloud at the council, Lyra raised her head. For the first time, he saw an expression on her face that was neither anger, nor fatigue, nor indifference. Surprise. Someone wanted to learn from her. Not to use her. To learn. Lyra said yes, in a single word. No strings attached. 3 alliances. 3 answers. All positive. Serena had done her job. And she'd done it for everyone. Not for herself. For the first time. Or at least, for the first time, that's how it looked. At 25th day, Nora came to him herself. It is to his room, to the library. He was reading reports on food supplies in the eastern provinces. Nora sat down across from him, silently. He put the papers aside. He waited. She didn't speak right away. She said she hadn't slept for 3 nights. She said she was praying, but didn't hear an answer. She said she was afraid. He listened. He didn't nod. He didn't interrupt. He listened. Nora spoke softly, almost in a whisper. She said that when her mother died, she was 3 years old. She doesn't remember her face. She remembers the smell. Warm, sweet. Then the smell disappeared and never returned. Her father didn't talk about her mother. Never. Her sisters didn't speak. Nora grew up in silence, in a void of a shape she didn't know, and she filled that void with the only thing she found: faith. God didn't leave. God didn't die. God smelled of incense and wax and was always there. He listened. He understood. He saw a pattern he'd seen dozens of times. A child loses a parent, finds a replacement, clings to the replacement so tightly that the replacement becomes more important than reality. Not because she believes more strongly than others, but because without faith there is emptiness beneath her feet. Nora said that the coordinating council was working, that the sisters had started talking to one another, that the defense plan was taking shape, and that this is exactly what frightens her. He asked why. Nora answered. She said that if the empire is saved not by God, but by 5 women at a round table, then what is the point of God? If prayers do not protect the walls, but engineers and soldiers protect what she does, what is the meaning of her branch? What is the meaning of 400 temples? What was the point of her own existence? He was silent for a long time. This was not a military problem, not a political one. It was an existential crisis, and he knew that not only Nora depended on his answer. 412 temples depended on it. 50,000 potential militiamen. The faith of an entire people. He spoke, slowly. He said that an engineer builds a wall. A soldier stands on the wall. A diplomat ensures the soldier has food. A spy tells where the enemy is coming from. But who tells the soldier why he must stand there? Who tells the peasant why he must take up a spear and go to the wall? Who tells the mother why she must let her son go? Not an order, not money, not fear. Meaning. Why? That is the only question that neither the general, nor the diplomat, nor the spy, nor the engineer can answer. Only she. Nora looked at him. He continued. He said that walls fall, swords break, treaties are torn up, machines rust. But faith doesn't rust. Meaning doesn't break. And when everything else collapses, the only thing that will remain standing are the people who know why they stand. Nora closed her eyes. He saw a single tear roll down her cheek. 1. She didn't wipe it away. She opened her eyes. She looked at him. She said he spoke like a priest. He replied that he spoke like a man who had spent 13 years searching for the answer to why a family stays together when it's easier to go their separate ways. And he had found one answer. Because together, they mean something. Apart, they're just people. Nora stood up. She bowed. Not to him, to something behind him, or inside him. She left. He stayed in the library. He looked at the table, at the papers with numbers. He thought he had just done the most subtle work since coming into this world. Not manipulation, not redirection. Therapy. Real therapy. Nora had come with a question to which she had no answer. He didn't give her an answer. He showed her that she already had the answer. That her question, why do we need God, was really the question, why do we need meaning? And that the answer to that question was her. The next day, Nora spoke before the priests of all 6 provinces. She gathered them in the palace temple. He stood by the wall. He listened. Nora spoke differently. No prayers, no scripture. She spoke of walls and swords and food, of soldiers standing on the walls, of peasants taking up spears, of mothers sending their sons away, and of how all these people need an answer to one question: why? And that the answer is the work of the temples. Not a prayer for victory, work. To go to the villages, to stand before the people, to look them in the eyes, and to tell them why. The priest listened. 412 pairs of eyes. He saw their faces change. Nora wasn't giving them an order. She was giving them a mission. The difference is the same as between a job and a calling. One is paid for the other, they die.
3 days later, the first priests left for the eastern provinces, not to pray, to prepare the people, to explain, to mobilize, not through fear, through purpose. On the 28th day, a second note arrived from Vivian, longer than usual. He read it in the garden by the fountain. A problem. Agent Wren in the central column passed on new information. Togrul knows more about the empire than expected, knows about the 5 sisters, knows about the conflict, knows about the advisor. Someone at court is working for the Horde. He reread the note. A spy. Togrul's spy in the empire. Someone who knows about the council, about the defense plan, about the 3 alliances, about Kyle. He folded the note, placed it under a stone, wrote a reply. 1 word. Who? The next morning, under the stone was Vivian's reply. 2 words. Not yet known. A spy in the empire. 3 months until the Horde. 5 sisters who have only just begun working together. And someone among them, or among their people, was passing everything on to Togru. He stood in the garden, morning, cold air. The fountain was murmuring. He thought about how, in his past life, the most difficult cases weren't the ones where the family was at war, but the ones where someone in the family was working to destroy it from within. Consciously, quietly, with a smile. He did say about spy to the not right away. That's that to say is to sow suspicion. And suspicion among the 5 sisters who had began to trust friend to a friend this poison. Everyone will look at each other. Each will think, what if it's her? And everything that he built 28 days will crumble in minute. He went to Vivian, in her office without windows. I sat across from her. He said that they need find a spy before that how the information ends up to the board. Vivian agreed. She said that already started the check. The circle of price is wide. The price is attended by sisters. Maurice keeps the minutes. 2 guards at the doors. Servants who are the hall. Notes that couriers carry from the sisters to their people. The information varies like ripples across water. Dozens people know parts of the plan. Someone know enough to draw up a general picture. He asked what exactly Togrul Vivian listed. He that sisters 5. She knows that they were at odds. He knows that an advisor who unites them. He knows about the defense for 3 directions. Doesn't the details. Does not knows about unions. Doesn't about the drawings Lyra. He paused to think. The man who knows the general picture, but doesn't knows the details. This is engineer Lyra. Not Serena's Serena. Not priest Nora. It's someone in the court. Someone who sees the council from above, but does participate in execution. He looked at Vivian. He asked Maurice. Vivian said that Maurice serves the dynasty 40 years. He replied that 40 years is a long time to get tired. Vivian looked at him. For a long time. Then she said she would check. He didn't think Maurice was a traitor, but he knew he couldn't rule anyone out. 13 years of experience. The most loving husband can be the most dangerous. The most loyal servant can be the most weary. They made a plan. Vivian would spread various false information through different channels. Each suspect would receive their own version. When one of the versions reached Togrul,
They would find out through which channel the leak had occurred. An old method, a classic one. It always works. He returned to his work. The council met every 3 days. He led it cautiously. He didn't pressure them. He didn't rush them. He allowed the sisters to argue, but kept the arguments within the scope of the task. On the 30th day, what he had been waiting for since day one happened. The third stage. The breakthrough of true feelings. It happened at the council. They were discussing the deployment of the militia. Nora proposed sending 10,000 to the eastern wall. Ilara said that untrained militiamen on the wall were a burden, not a help. Nora said that these people were going to defend their homes and deserved the right to stand on the front lines. Ilara said that the right to die was meaningless without the ability to survive. Nora raised her voice, for the first time in his presence. She said that Ilara had always viewed people as numbers, that to her, a soldier was a unit and a peasant was a zero. Ilara stood up. She said it was better to be a living number than a dead hero. Nora stood up. She said that Ilara was just like her father. Silence. Absolute silence. He felt the air in the room grow thicker. Ilara turned pale. Serena froze. Lyra lowered her eyes. Vivian leaned forward. Nora said it quietly, almost calmly, like her father. 3 words, and each one was a knife. Because her father hadn't gone down to Lyra's workshop. Her father hadn't written the law of succession. Her father hadn't spoken of her mother. Her father had distributed burdens instead of building a family. Her father had regarded people as functions. Ilara held an army the way her father had held an empire. She worked. She didn't live. Ilara clenched her fists. He saw her knuckles turn white, saw the muscles in her neck tense, saw her holding back a blow, not a physical one, a verbal one. She wanted to respond, wanted to say something that would be beyond repair. He'd seen that movement 100 times. Her mouth opens, the word flies, and that's it. He intervened, not between them, beside them. He said Nora was right. The 4 sisters turned to him, Ilara too. He said Nora was right, that they were all like their father, all 5 of them. Not just Ilara, all of them. Ilara commands an army just as he commanded an empire. Serena smiles the way he used to smile in front of the ambassadors. Vivian hides in the shadows the way he used to hide from grief. Lyra works in silence the way he used to work. Nora believes the way he wanted to believe, that everything would work itself out. 5 daughters, 5 copies of one man, 5 ways to repeat his mistakes. Silence. A long one. He waited. Serena spoke first, quietly, without a smile. She said he was right. She said she remembered how her father stood in front of the mirror and rehearsed his smile before receptions, how she stood behind him as a child and mimicked him. Lyra spoke. She said her father had come to the workshop once, when she was 7. He looked at her drawings, said they were cute, left. Cute. 1 word. She'd waited 20 years for another word. Vivian spoke up. She said their father knew about every one of her spies, and never once said he was proud. Not once. Nora spoke up. She said that their father hadn't come to the temple even once after their mother's death. Not once in 23 years. Ilara spoke last. She said that their father had named her a general at 14. He gave her an army, and never once asked if she was afraid. 5 stories, 5 wounds, 1 reason. A father who loved but didn't know how to show it. A father who handed out responsibilities instead of hugs. Who built an empire out of his daughters instead of building a family out of them. He stood and listened. He didn't interfere. This was what he had worked 28 days for. The moment when people stop talking about walls and strategies and start talking about what hurts. In his office in his past life, that moment usually came during the 3rd or 4th session. Here, it came during the 11th. All things considered, that was fast. He let the silence linger. A minute. 2. Then he said one thing. He said their father had died without leaving a will. Not because he hadn't had time, because he couldn't choose. He couldn't name one of the 5 as better than the rest. Not because they were equal, but because each of them was a part of him, and choosing one meant cutting off the other 4 parts of himself. Silence. Nora began to cry, quietly. Lyra clenched her fists under the table. Serena closed her eyes. Vivian stared at the wall. Ilara looked at the empty throne behind her. The council ended there. Without a decision on the militia, without an agenda, without conclusions. The sisters dispersed, in silence. He was left alone. He sat down in a chair. He placed his hands on the table. He thought. The 3rd stage was over. The breakthrough had happened. Now the 4th would begin, the most unpredictable one. The stage when, after the breakthrough, people either grow closer or drift apart. He didn't know which option the 5 sisters would choose. He couldn't know. It was impossible to control. All he could do was wait, and be there when they decided. At 32th day, Lyra knocked on his door. The first time. Before he came to her. Before she used the drawings in library. Previously she said in short. Now she stood by his door. He opened the door. She went in, without invitation. She sat in chair. He sat on the bed. He waited. Lyra spoke. She said that after the council, she slept 2 nights. She said that she thought about her father, about the kind, about 20 years. She said she'd realized one thing. Father didn't come not because he wasn't interested, but because he was afraid. He asked what he was afraid of. Lyra answered. He was afraid to see her mother in her. Lyra looked more like her mother than the rest. Her hands, the habit of doodling, the habit of staying silent. Her father couldn't look at Lyra without seeing the woman he'd lost 23 years ago. And instead of saying so, he simply didn't come. He listened, didn't nod, didn't agree, didn't say she was right or wrong. He listened. Because Lyra wasn't waiting for confirmation. Lyra was waiting for a witness. Someone who would listen and not say, "That's nice." She fell silent. Then she said one more thing. She said she wanted to show Ilara the workshop. In person. Not through drawings, not through reports. To walk her past the tables. To show her every mechanism. Just as he had shown her. He said it was a good idea. Lyra left. He stayed sitting on the bed, thinking. The 4th stage had begun. Rapprochement. Lyra had decided on her own to show Ilara her world. Without his involvement, without his request. She had decided on her own. It was more important than any alliance treaty, because it was voluntary. 2 days later, Ilara went down to the workshop. He didn't go. No need. It was between them. He found out the result that evening, through a note from Vivian. 4 sentences. Ilara spent 4 hours in the workshop. Lyra showed her everything. Ilara ordered the iron supplies to the workshop doubled, and hugged Lyra at the door. He reread the last sentence. Hugged. Ilara. The general with a scar running from her temple to her jaw. She hugged the younger sister she hadn't noticed for 20 years. At the workshop door. He folded the note, stuck it in his boot, sat down on the floor, closed his eyes. In his past life, he would have written about this in a report. A breakthrough in therapy for the so-and-so family. Physical contact initiated by an aggressive participant. There were no reports here. There was a note from a spy. And one word. She hugged him. On the 35th day, Vivian found the leak. Not a spy, a channel. The false investment method had worked. The version that reached Togrul was the one transmitted via the pigeon mail system. Not via couriers, not via servants, via pigeons.
Someone was intercepting the pigeons on the route between the palace and the eastern garrisons, reading the messages, copying them, sent them on. The contents went to the horde. Vivian said the interception was taking place at a point 2 days' journey from the capital, an intermediate dovecote,
a station where the pigeons are swapped out. A man named Grace runs the station, an old pigeon fancier. He's been working there for 20 years. Vivian sent people. 3 days later, Grace was brought to the capital. The interrogation lasted 6 hours. He wasn't present. He didn't want to be. Vivian's interrogations aren't conversations. The results came in that evening. Grace wasn't working for Togrul. Grace was working for a man in the capital who paid him in gold for copies of the messages. Grace didn't know the man's name. They met through an intermediary. The intermediary's name was Court, a horse dealer in the lower city. Vivian found Court. Court had fled 2 hours before Vivian's people arrived. Someone had warned him. Someone inside the system. Vivian came to him at night, angry. He could tell by her gait. Tough, fast. She sat on the edge of the table, said the chain ends with Court. Court ran. Someone tipped him off. That someone knew Vivian was looking for a leak. Knew about the false investment method. Knew enough to act 2 hours faster. He asked who knew about the method. Vivian said 3 people knew. Her, him, and one of her agents whom she had tasked with spreading the false versions. An agent named Delon, 20 years in intelligence, a trusted confidant. Vivian said that if Delon was a traitor, then everything she had built over 20 years was compromised. Every operation, every agent, every network. He saw how Vivian held herself, steady, steely, but her hands were trembling slightly. Exclusive videos, story continuations, and bonus content are already available on Patreon before YouTube, so check the link in the description for early access to all new recaps and continuations.